So tonight we're here with Alan McGee. He's from Memphis Game Farm. How you doing, Alan?
I'm terrific. Sorry for the technical difficulties on my end, gentlemen.
That's all right. I told him about the picture that I got behind me today. I had a brood mug, and she was being faithful with them. I just let her sit on them, see what happened. And I went out there today, and I was like, man, I got cracked eggs all over the place. Ain't no way something got into that pen. That pen's made out of steel wire, and I got hardware cloth all around it. And then I got to looking, all these little bitty mugs walking all over the place.
Amen.
I had a happy moment. I appreciate it. I've hatched out probably thousands of birds.
Yeah.
That's the first time that I've ever had it successfully happen with the mama doing the job. It's hard to find good brood fowl.
It's hard to find them, and you incubate chickens a real long time, and for years and years, and you'll find that the hens won't be as broody. You'll get some from time to time that will. I try to let mine hatch every year, the last of it. That's just, I'll pull eggs at the beginning of the year, and then the last set of eggs, I'll let the hens sit on them and hatch them for me.
So I got 16 breeding pens.
Oh.
And this pen is the only one that had a chick go broody.
Wow.
And I told my wife, I said, this hen right here, she earned her spot on the farm.
Amen. That's right. When you check out the babies as they grow up and see how they look and go through for defects and faults, then you'll know what really tells.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Now I do know that I've got some stags that she hatched off, or that I hatched off from her in the incubator.
Right.
And they turned out to be pretty good, and the hens turned out to be pretty good. So
these will probably be better. Natural is the best way to go on a lot of things, I've learned.
Yeah.
We artificially do things with the incubator, and it's what I do as well to get numbers.
Mm-hmm.
I deal with, like everybody else, we deal with predators on all levels, ground and air.
Yeah.
So you have to put down numbers if you're ever going to have any selection.
Right. I see a lot of people talking about 10%. If you want 10 good birds, you're going to need to hatch 100.
I tell you, unfortunately, that's what I've experienced this year. I put down 200, and if I pick up 30 stags, I'll count myself fortunate. But I dealt with foxes this year, and they're hard to deal with. Gray foxes, not as bad as red ones, but red ones, man. I had some I'd turned loose. They were in the low-lying branches. And for some reason, this particular fox went through there and was just catching them, shaking them, killing them, and going to another one, catching them, shaking them, and killing them. He wasn't running off with them. They were a little smaller than quail size, or a little better than quail size. When I got down there, I had about 30 of them dead quick. But I have cameras up that go straight to my phone, let me know when something's going on the yard. And a good dog is hard to beat too, but red fox, there's a reason they're called a fox. They're slick.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah.
So we've already talked about, I've introduced you and everybody knows where you're from. But
yeah,
one thing that I need to know, what got you into game fowl? Where did it start for Alan McGee?
There was a couple of good men around my area. And there was one gentleman that would walk chickens at my grandfather's place. And I didn't know anything about it. I was just a young buck. This will be a unique story in some respects, but I did not know that my grandfather was walking game chickens really my whole life for a man named Mr. Red Anderson. I knew my grandmother didn't care for him much because he chewed tobacco and he'd spit on her patio. But he was around, and so I went off to the military, and I picked it up when I was in the Philippines. And it just sunk in like it was a natural thing. And then when I got home, my grandfather introduced me to Mr. Red, who introduced me to John Moore and Johnny Fay and different ones. And it just developed and grew from there. I wouldn't say I was a multi-generational cocker by any means, but that's really where it sunk in and started with me.
I got you. That's to me. People like to blame people for stuff,
Right.
and I blame my son. I found out when my son was 14 years old that he was handling,
Wow.
and I said, "Son, you're doing what?" Because
Right.
I found some proceeds, and he told me what he was doing, and I just shook my head,
Wow.
and I said, "I got to see this," and I was hooked. It is what it is, and it's something I don't. It's hard to explain.
No, it is. There's different reasons guys do this, and me, it would be the camaraderie. I have many friends still that are really mentors in a lot of ways, and they're in their 80s and 90s now.
Mhm.
And I just enjoy the camaraderie, but I enjoy the competition. I do. I like to raise poultry, and I like to raise one that's better than the next fella. I think that's what we all do.
That's
We
right.
try to raise some that are going to be above average and better than the next man down the line. So I would say that's really what has held me tight to it. It's an awful lot of work for very little happiness, but when the happiness comes, it makes it all worthwhile. And I tell you, I have met a lot of great people through this industry, you included. You and I wouldn't know each other if it wasn't for Game Fowl. It's an interesting thing, and I say this everywhere I've been. Men in the game fowl business are the same all around the world. It doesn't matter where you go. We all have a love and a passion for our poultry and our families.
Yep.
And just like you and your son, you were interested in what he was participating in and doing. And as soon as you got involved in it, it just grew from there. As my grandfather introduced me to some gentlemen, then it grew from there. Mr. Red's passed, John William and Johnny were all gone on to the great pit in the sky, and my grandfather as well. But I still am fortunate to have some really good, solid old timers around me that are interested. They aren't able to do what they used to, but we will always chat and get together and discuss different problems, discuss different things that we've noticed. And it's a blessing for me. I've really met some great people all around the world and made some lifelong friends. So it's a real blessing if you go about it the right way and have the right attitude, I believe.
Yeah, that's definitely important is having the right attitude. There's a lot of people that don't, and I found that they usually don't last.
No,
I've seen some run off.
yeah, there's guys that get in it for one reason or other, and they have a dream and a goal, and then if they run into some adversity, they'll typically fade on away. And then there's others that are in the business for selling poultry and such as that. I won't knock them either because they've got their niche that they fulfill a need, and it's a good thing that they're there. And different people say different things about different people's poultry all over the world. But the number one thing I've found is, and one of the reasons that I really haven't ventured into that market is people don't care or tend for them like that they should. They just don't know. And then they'll get a family. And then the next thing you know, they're bad mouthing the man they got it from. And I just don't cotton to that because what you get is what you have. And then it's up to you to make a selection and bring it forward. You never stay the same. You either advance in this field or you fall behind.
Yeah,
It's strictly on you. Are you carrying that water when it's 100 degrees outside to your roosters twice a day? Are you giving them the nutrition that they have to have when they're molting or before or after or even just throughout the year from shell to pit? What are you doing? Again, I've been real fortunate to meet different people, and one of our good friends, Jeff Mattocks, has helped me on a lot of different levels as well. We disagree on some things, but that's just because he's a nutritionist and I'm a rooster man. There's different things that he has introduced me to, though, that have helped my game and helped me tremendously.
yeah. He definitely does know a lot.
man, he's forgotten more than I think I'll ever learn, to be honest, Carey.
I can see that. I started studying nutrition under him a good while back. And I've been up there to Pennsylvania a couple of times and sat down with him. And he's shown me a lot of stuff, and he's gave me some homework, and then I'd go back and we've got online like this together, and I have learned a whole lot. And my granddaddy, when he had some bannies, he's just throwing down some scratch. That's what I thought. You just feed them and water them. I would have never realized the science behind it and the breeding until I've learned a lot. And we were talking a while ago about people that get what they get, and then they don't handle it right. They don't take good care of it, and then they get mad at the person they got it from. In my book, you got your foundation fowl, the birds you start with, or hatching eggs, however you got your started. After that, it's on you.
It really is. And again, from the shell to their adults is what counts. And what you put into that egg matters a lot. And that is something that Jeff has helped me with too. I didn't realize some things. I took a few classes when I was in school on poultry science and such as that. But Jeff Mattocks, now I tell you what, he is a nutritionist guru. I encourage people to listen to him, even though it might go against the grain. It can go against some of the things that you were taught. But if you'll give him half a chance, you'll find out that he will bring you up and make you better than you are where you're at. And I'll tell you again, that's the biggest thing. If you're not advancing your poultry every year and you're not advancing yourself every year, you're falling behind.
That's right.
Because nothing ever stays the same with this.
And to me, that's where you fail as a breeder. It's not what you've done in the past. It's the lessons you learn from it.
It is.
Yeah. He's taught me several valuable lessons. One about flipping the bucket. That's what he and I call it. And you go out to your yard and you just flip your bucket and you sit down and you just watch them.
Right.
And you see how chicken's chicken. And
you do.
When you know what you're looking for, if they're doing it right.
It takes observation and it takes time to observe them. It really does. Mm-hmm. I get some peace by sitting out in my yard, enjoy watching them do their thing. And then I'll move down to where the biddies are at and watch them a while. I'll watch my hens some and how they do what they do. It takes a little time. I don't spend 8 hours a day out there, of course, but I will typically spend 2 or 3 hours a day with my poultry every day. That's where I find my quiet time to get away from the stresses of the world. So, yeah.
Tell me this. What's your go-to breed? What kind of go?
There you go. You're going to try to nail me down into one hole, and it's just going to be hard to do that. I've been fortunate to have good fowl from some top breeders in the past. I have the Kelsos and I have some Albanese, and I have butchers, and I have a family of grays. They're difficult to raise, but I've got some of those. I might have 2 or 3 this year. I put probably 30 of those on the ground. They just get picked off because of their color, I think. And I don't have a one specific go-to with my poultry. I use them all around the world, and each family does its job. And actually, that's where Jeff and I, we really want to say the first time we met was when he came over to watch me in the World Slasher in May last year. And we got one away from that one. I was close, but no cigar.
Yeah.
But he came out and visited with me, and that's where we had some crossing up too, because he had his opinion about things and the way a chicken was supposed to be. And I don't disagree with the man when it comes to a backyard flock or when it comes to a farm that raises poultry for one specific reason or another. But when it comes to competition, then it's a little different. And he's grown into that too. He understands that, I think, more and more.
See, a lot of people say, oh, you got to have this kind of bird for this and that kind of birds for that and that kind of bird for this. But I'm like you. I feel like it's not as much as the bird as it is the breeder.
They have different families that they believe are designed for different things. And in my opinion, in my experience, and what I have been striving for is I work at a percentage. And if they don't meet 80 percentile, then they're just not going to make it on my yard. So I work at 80% and up. I have discarded one family a little while back. And it was because I didn't matter what I did, couldn't get enough numbers of them. They were an old family that I'd had, and then they had just deteriorated, and I tried to bring them back, and I just wasn't able to do it. I had to let them go. I hated to do it because they were from a friend that I truly adored, loved, and thought a lot of. And that's another problem that a lot of us have run into with this thing is that we'll get too many lines going, and the next thing you know, you will overrun when you won't get the numbers you need from each family to be able to procreate and do future breeds properly.
Yep. I agree. Like I said before, I've got 16 breeding pens.
Right.
And that's where I house my cream of the crop.
Right.
Regardless of what kind of bird it is, I've got a couple of different types that I show at a couple of different places. And some of them I have for my dinner table. I raise American breasts for table traits. You wouldn't want to put a mug on the table. You'd have to put 5 or 6 of them to have a meal at my house. But yeah, so I'm always looking. My mentor taught me you want a king, an heir, and a spare.
Right.
With the lines that I work with, I try to have 3 sets. And they do different things for me. And that's what I want to keep. And the rest of them, they go to shows and they go to work.
Right. For me, with my Kelsos, they would come a little light and they would come a little dark. So I've divided them into 2 families. Predominantly, the dark ones come dark, and the light ones come light now.
Mm-hmm.
It's taken several years to get them that way, but they pretty well will go along it. 1 out of 40 or 50 will come back and throw back to the other side, and it's in there, so I can't do anything about it. But they are 2 separate families, and I do work at. I like what you just said, a king. What did you say? A king, an heir, and a spare.
Yes, sir.
With each of my lines, I try to have about 4 brood pens working at all times with each line. And I will breed to those. Some I will line breed and some I rotationally breed. And to keep my gene pool diverse in some respects. In the same way with my butchers, they were a light side and a dark side. And I have really tried to this year nail that down where I could separate that out. So in all actuality, between the Kelso line and the butcher line, I've got 4 families when they really are just 2. And I'm working on that with the Hatch family I have. They're all over the place right now. Still, they'll throw light, they'll throw dark, some will throw peak comb, some will throw straight comb, and I'm going to settle those down. But that's the way I acquired them, and they've been really good to me. And again, it's not one specific brand of poultry. They either make the cut or they don't. I've used all families and all environments all around the world, and they've shown to be well.
All right. Let's see here. We got a question here. Michael Dwayne says, when breeding, you breed halves 3 ways, 4 ways, and then line breed back? Or is there something different that you would do?
With me, I keep a real closed yard.
Mm-hmm.
And so we'll say the light Kelsos, just take them for right.
Okay.
I'll have 4 pens. I'll keep a couple of pullets each year back for each pen. And I will typically line breed ace cock to those. And each pen has its own cock. Mm-hmm. And then I'll keep a spare back a brother to the one that I'm breeding, just in case something happens, like can happen to us. But he'll have a particular market for that pen, and I won't change that mark for that pen. And I'll either line breed the rooster side or I'll line breed the head side. I'll take the best stag out of whichever pen, and I'll have that fourth pen over there, and I'll usually throw an ace stag in that pen every year to keep I call it a rotational breeding system. So, but each pen for me will have its particular mark, and there'll be 4 pens for one family. And I'll have anywhere from 2 to 3 sisters in each pen with a cock. And that's how I do it. I don't do 3 and 4-way crosses myself. I like to fight mine, or should I say use mine, excuse me, as a inbred family of the same family. But I will outcross, and I do get that hybrid vigor when I do it. And I like using those as well. I will pass second or third mating. So if I had a butcher Kelso hen, I may take a Craig cock and put over them the following year.
I can say a lot of people are really nervous about line breeding, and they don't want to have chicken with 4 spurs or something crazy like that, or 3 eyes. But I will tell you this, if line breeding is done correctly, once you get your birds the way you want them and they make you happy, line breeding, if done correctly, can be done for years. And I say that because I have one of the sets of birds that I have, they come from a family that has been line bred for over 80 years.
Right.
And these birds are winning shows all over the country.
Good deal.
If it's done correctly and they're well maintained, you can line breed for a long time.
Take selection, and then
yes,
we'll get the 3-eyed, 4-spurred sometimes out of them. But you're not picking for that one to breed to, right? That's why you have numbers, and that's why you need to keep your family. You don't need too many families. You got
to keep them clean.
You do. You have to keep them clean, and you want them to be real thrifty as babies when they hatch, and that'll tell you a lot about what you're going to have coming. And if they're not, then you've probably gone to the well maybe one too many times. But poultry, you can't tell what kind of potato it is till you peel it sometimes.
Yeah. So, I know there's a lot of science behind breeding, but there's also a lot of experience that outdo that science sometimes.
You have to have a method, and you have to be scientifically and design.
Yep.
But by the same, measure, it has to function the way you desire it to. So if it doesn't measure up to your cut, or whatever it is, if it ain't weighing enough when it goes to the table, if it doesn't have the way the comb's supposed to be when it goes to the show, if it doesn't have the ability when it shows up somewhere else, then it
ain't what you want.
It's not what you want.
That's right. All right. Let me ask you this. You don't have to be exact, but roughly, how many do you think you hatch out every year?
I try to put at least 250 on the ground a year. Sometimes a little more. I should have put probably 400 down on the ground this year for the foxes. Boy, they wore me out. Yeah. It just varies. It varies from year to year. It varies on my schedule and what I'm able to go do.
I can see that.
This year, I tend to be in Mexico and the Philippines and Guam, and I've been invited out to another area. Anyway, I'll see if we can go there. It'll be good.
There we go. Now, we talked about foxes. Yeah. What other kind of hurdles do you encounter? And what's some things that maybe could be done to help prevent some of them?
A good dog is worth its weight in gold. That's one thing for certain, or two. I like trail cameras that go to my phone, and it immediately notifies me when there's a situation or problem. Health is a giant factor. I do not vaccinate my poultry. I do vaccinate them when they are shipped overseas for breeding purposes. And because in different parts of the world, they have a lot of different diseases that we can encounter that we don't hear. Clean water, clean feed, and a closed yard. Only letting all your buddies walk over there with their dirty shoes on that have been to somebody else's yard.
Yeah.
A little Clorox and a squirt bottle and a little water and squirt their feet. Or just keep an extra pair of rubber boots around. Let your buddy slip them on if he wants to walk out there on the yard.
Yeah, that's what I do. I've got a couple pair of yellow ones, and they're just for whoever shows up. And I'm not real big on letting folks come over. I'm just not. And biosecurity is one of the reasons why. I don't always know what they got on their farm, and it is what it is now. If somebody wants to see what my genetics looks like or see what my pens look like, I'll FaceTime them and show them.
Sure.
But not just anybody comes over.
Unfortunately, in today's time, you can't just allow people to do like we used to do. I would just show up unannounced at different people's farms, and they were always welcoming and happy to have me in. But in today's time, you just can't do that anymore, unfortunately.
Yeah.
You just don't know. You just don't know. I'm very much the same way. You guys will tell me that they want to come by, and I'll just tell them I'm unavailable most of the time.
I understand. Now, I couldn't bring you on the show without talking about feed.
Oh, Lord.
So, if you would, tell us what you feed your bitties and what you feed the ones that you grow out.
Well, my baby chick, I feed a plain chick starter. I like a little boiled egg, and I like a little buttermilk. I've used some of Jeff's product, that Rapido, a little of that goes a long way. They'll be bigger than turkeys if you give them too much. It's just different things that I do. I think you need to keep your protein levels pretty high when they're coming on. Some people use turkey grower. I like a little cat food from time to time, a little catfish floater from time to time. Just a variation of things. Nothing just hammered down where this is the bag I'm going to use every time for everything. I do believe they need variety in their diet. I like sardines. I like jack mackerel. I like ground beef and ground deer meat. A little alone. A little.
Yeah.
So if I've got a bucket of feed, I might have 3 pounds of ground deer meat in there too. But that only happens about once a week.
Yep. That'd be probably about 25 pounds worth right there.
Yep.
Okay. Mm-hmm. We've already talked a little bit about free range in your fowl and some of the foxes that you have. See, here in the South, my problem is raccoons.
Notorious in minks, weasels. If it flies, walks, runs, has eyes that breathes oxygen, it eats a chicken.
Yeah.
So,
on 2 legs or 4.
It doesn't matter. It's a 24-hour-a-day job, and it will break your heart, especially when your neighbor's dog get in your rooster yard. And that right there, yeah. And then you got neighbor problems. Then if they aren't good people, then you're going to have problems. Most good people will make sure that they take care of their situation, or where it doesn't cause you problems.
Have any special way of training or conditioning?
I'm sorry?
Do you have a special way
Say it again?
Do you have a special way that you train your birds or condition your birds you might want to share with us? Or maybe some tips or some tricks for the guy?
I do a little, I'm from the old school, so I do a little table work and I do a little rotation. I let them bump, and I'm watching every time. I don't let them waller hog. I let them go into each other a few times. And then the one that continuously stays the same or gets a little better, that'll be the one that I'll go with.
I understand that. Let's see. We're going to talk about worming. You said that, do you worm on your farm here?
I do, definitely. I'm not, I'm of the opinion that some worms are okay and they need them. I'm not one of these guys that are going to worm every 15 days or every 30 days. I'll know when they need worming because they won't be cleaning up their feed. As long as they're aggressively hitting that cup, and that is one thing that I have moved to. I don't feed my chickens on the ground. I feed my chickens out of a cup. Every chicken in the pen, every chicken on the cord,
Yep.
they all have a cup. And it keeps a lot of your parasites under control and it keeps a lot of disease down.
Yeah, I've learned that. I see a lot of people, they just don't want to do that. They're like, hey, man, I got 200 cocks. That's a lot of cups.
It is
And
a lot of cups. And when you get 300, it's a lot more.
I agree. It is.
But I'll tell you what, your averages will go way up if you keep them off the ground.
One of the things that I said to somebody one time, I said, do you eat Fruity Pebbles? Yeah. Do you put them in the toilet or do you put them in a bowl?
Yeah.
Because when you throw chickens, they can't control where they go to the bathroom.
Nope.
And when you put it on the ground in their area, you're essentially putting it in the toilet.
Yep.
And to me,
they've had the pathogens is just their own feces in the ground too. You know, we have mold here in the South too. You've got to guard against. So mold toxin is a terrible thing. I've just found that a feed cup with a couple of holes drilled in it, because, you know, we're going to get rain too. And you let that water leak out and you feed in that feed cup and you'll clean that cup about once every week or once every 2 weeks. You will not have near the worms or the heavy load of problems that a lot of people carry.
I found a 1/8-inch drill bit that was a foot long. And this thing, I ordered it off the internet and it came in. My wife said, what in the crap are you going to do with that drill bit? I said, I'm going to save myself a lot of time.
Yep. Go right through about 8, 10, 15 cups real quick.
It'll go through 12 real quick.
Yep.
So, yeah, because here, I'll feed mine in cup, whether they be on the ground, in a breeding pen like what this one is, in a fly pen. In fly pens, I have cups sitting around their perches.
Right.
And especially in the South, even as they say it's not going to rain today, it can still rain today.
Yeah.
And
if you don't like the weather here where I'm at, just hang on about 15 minutes.
I'm saying 15, 20 minutes, it'll change. And it doesn't matter if you're feeding a coarse mash, which I do feed a lot of coarse mash, or if you're feeding a pellet. You drill small holes in the cups, it's not going to leak out. Maybe a little, but your birds running around on the yard can eat that up.
I want to back up and say one other thing about feeding with you, and I can't stress this enough. People have their opinions on things, but grit, and I don't mean oyster shell, actual grit is a vital substance. They do not have teeth, and they need that to develop all of their body properly. They need that grit. The other people give it free range. They have it in a cup. Rooster knows when to get it. I like to feed mine in their feed about once a week, whether they want it or not. They'll leave it in the cup if they don't want it.
They would. I actually published I wrote an article that I put on Facebook a couple of days ago, I believe, because you see everybody, they're wanting to save a few bucks on their feed, and then they'll go out and they'll buy garbage. But actual studies show that a chicken will reduce its feed consumption by 20% or more, but at least 20% if they have adequate amount of grit. And just because you got some rocks in the ground and in your yard doesn't mean that you have grit.
No, it needs sharp edges and it needs to be super hard. And I think they pull minerals out of it too.
Yep, they do.
And they'll pass them.
But that's the easiest way.
I make sure I don't have any grit about 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Before I go out, I make sure they don't have it. That's one thing I will pull from them.
Now, earlier you mentioned vaccinating.
Mhm.
When you ship birds overseas, what all do you have to vaccinate against?
It depends on the country I'm going into. Fowl pox and Newcastle's and such. And I don't vaccinate here before they go because our diseases are different than theirs.
Mm-hmm.
So when they land is when they get their vaccines there.
All right. So you have your guy on the other end do it.
Whoever I'm going out to visit, whoever I'm sending some boost to, they
I'm doing that.
vaccinate because that's their area and they know what they've got, and I don't.
Right. And also doing that too, that's going to satisfy whatever that local country needs for that fowl.
And you need to stay within the guidelines and the laws. If you want to be welcome, you need to, by George, make sure you're following the rules.
Now, we talked a lot about different things and knowing about your birds and all that good stuff. And the last question I've got for you tonight is how much time do you spend on the average day in your yard watching your birds?
I think we touched on that earlier. That's where I find everybody has their opinion of things, and I'm a praying man. I find my solace out there, my poultry every afternoon. A lot of times I'll be out there early in the morning just to check on things. But I find that peace in the afternoons a lot of times. At least my wife will say I spend too much time, but 2 to 3 hours, sometimes longer, especially if I'm getting some ready to go out. I'll spend 5 hours, 6 hours a day with them.
Yeah.
It's a lot of moving them and putting them on the bench a little bit and getting them tamed and just checking them out and making sure that they're happy. It's one of the biggest things people miss is a rooster, when he's happy, he'll let you know he's happy. If you can keep their spirit up and happy, they'll do well for you.
I've always said a rooster is like an employee. You take care of them, you feed them, and you pay them, and they'll do anything you want them to do.
They really will.
If you miss out on any of it, they're not going to do it. We're right. We actually went past 8 o'clock a little bit. We had some technical difficulties. I do appreciate you putting up with all the technical difficulties and coming on the show.
I'm honored to be on your show, Carey, and I'm thankful that you invited me. I just wish everybody out there, and I encourage you to spend a little time in your yards and keep closed yard, and that way the disease doesn't spread. And you guys keep a close eye on things and learn what you can, where you can, because everybody knows something. Not every man knows it all.
That's it, folks. Y'all have a good night.